Hello and welcome to Unsportsmanlike Conduct, the show where two British brothers talk all things NFL. I'm your host, Dom Corbs, and I'm joined by my co-host, Nick Corbs, who I must congratulate you, Nick, because you got your first win.
Yes, much like the Kansas City Chiefs, the Edinburgh Mavericks on a roll, 1-0 over Glasgow, our first time in 4 years beating them. So it was a bad day to be a receiver. I got 0 targets, 0 yards, zero receptions, but has a mean blocks on some deep corners, so that's all that matters.
You're a man of my own heart, Nick. You're a man of my own heart. The Corbett brothers are really tearing up the Britball scene in the UK with their stat lines regularly, I see.
Yeah. Well, Dom, do you see Nottingham beat UE as well? Not to get too Britbally with it, but that was another big upset.
I did. Their QB I saw on Instagram is like he looks massive. Like he looked like Cam Newton. But anyway, enough Britball. This is not a Britball podcast, thankfully. This is an NFL college football podcast, and we are now new at the midpoint, essentially week 8 of the NFL season. So what we're going to do for this episode is, because it's now week 8, we have a pretty good idea of what teams essentially really are now. It's hard in the first week. It's impossible in the first week. It's very hard even up to something like week 5. By week 8 now, we have a pretty good idea. There could be a late surge. There could be a late collapse. We saw that in the Eagles last year, for example. But for the most part, the bad teams, we certainly know who they are. So what we're going to do now is we're going to rank our top 3 worst teams. So essentially go with the third worst, the second worst, to the worst. Now, it's not simply going to be the worst team by record, because it's more nuanced than that. Otherwise, it'd be a pretty boring episode. So before we start with our top 3 then, Nu, are there any honourable mentions you want to quickly bring up who didn't quite make your top 3 but are kind of in that mixer?
Well, Dom, I can mention the whole of the AFC East out of the Bills, to be honest with you. I'm not, so my criteria for the 3 worst teams are going to be teams without hope, and we'll talk about that later. But teams with basically no chance of getting better. So that's why even the Patriots are having an especially bad year. They have May. They have some pieces that there's stuff to be excited about. A new coach, all that sort of stuff. But the 3 that I'm going to focus on today are teams that I really think are the bottom of the barrel without hope.
Nice. It's funny because, again, I want to stress that when we do episodes like this, we don't tell each other our rankings before time so that we can get like a genuine reaction and kind of genuine responses. I think that's more fun for us and it's a bit more fun to listen to. So I've kind of approached it in exactly the same way you have, which is brilliant, which means we're aligned. I mentioned also the Patriots in my honourable mentions because I said that we knew they weren't going to be a good team this year. Drake May looks like the real deal. Christian Gonzalez looks like the real deal. They have hope. Essentially, I completely agree with you. So they're not in my bottom 3, despite I believe they're kind of like second or third in terms of like overall draft.
It's strength of schedule. It's all pretty apples and oranges at this point, but yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of 2-win teams knocking about. There is one team, though, that I did want to give an honourable mention to in a positive way, and that's the Cleveland Browns. Because up until this weekend, I think they would have been, for both of us, the worst team in the NFL. And it's so amazing that a team can so quickly change simply by upgrading. Well, it's actually not that simple at all, but upgrading at quarterback from literally Deshaun Watson, who's playing at a historically bad level, to Jameis Winston. He threw for 344 yards and 3 touchdowns. He did get away with a very, very lucky interception, but that's the Jameis experience, isn't it? Yeah. But Deshaun Watson, in his 19 games for the Browns, didn't throw for a single game of more than 300 yards. He didn't throw for 300 yards once. Jameis Winston, done it already. So everything looks better. The offensive weapons look better. The offensive line looked better. It wasn't a perfect team. The Browns aren't a perfect team, but the fans especially deserve this win, man. Like, Watson's reign of terror is over. We can all sleep more soundly at night.
Yeah, Dom, I completely agree. And Jameis Winston is probably one of the most likable players in the NFL. You go from the most dislikable to the most likable. And in that game, he's the first quarterback this season to have 40-plus attempts, 0 interceptions. He played great, but I think what Browns fans and NFL fans in general need to recognize is that Jameis Winston, the only thing consistent about Jameis Winston is his inconsistency.
Yeah, nice.
If you think back to that famous 30 touchdown, 30 interception, 5,000 yard season,
30 for 30.
Which is the most banter season I think I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
That's what you get. You get these amazing plays, these amazing games, but I know next week he's probably going to throw for two picks and 3 fumbles. Like, it's just what he does.
Yeah, he's a gunslinger, and he's not going to take the Browns to the playoffs, I don't think, but he will definitely make them a better team and will make them worth supporting, worth watching, worth literally like being a part of the league now that they've not got that creep Deshaun Watson, who not only, as we've discussed, was a massive weirdo, putting it lightly, but also was playing terribly, also putting it lightly. But then, Nu, hit me with your third ranked worst team.
So my third ranked worst team is a real surprise to me, is the New York Jets. I really, really do not like this team at all in the way they're built. We talked about them earlier, and a couple of weeks earlier, and I said there's no need to panic for the Jets. They will still do well. Things will line up. But they've gotten rid of the head coach, gotten rid of Zach Wilson, brought in Aaron Rodgers, and nothing's changed. They have the talent. I think they've got Nathaniel Hackett, which I think is holding them back. But they've got one of the best quarterbacks of all time. Garrett Wilson, Offensive Rookie of the Year. You've got Sauce Gardner, the best corner in the league. And they're just not very good. And the reason why I have them so low is because I don't know why they're so dysfunctional. And I don't see how they can root out that dysfunction. Teams which are bad, oftentimes it's a quarterback that's bad or a coach that's bad. And that move can make your team better. But I do not see that with the Jets. I do not know. I think it's the $1 million question, is why are they so bad and how do you make them better?
I mean, you're right, Nu. The Jets are a team which has definitely not lived up to the expectations that we had of them. I think we can put that lightly. I mean, I saw them play live in London, and it's not that Rodgers is washed physically. Like, he's not done a Russell Wilson at Denver or, one of those other kind of like big quarterback moves where they're just simply not the same player. He's not obviously the quarterback he once was, but it's not simply that Rodgers isn't playing well. It's much more nuanced than that. And I think you're right to put them definitely on this list. Now, the question is then, Nu, if you did have to fix the New York Jets and let's say you're the GM or you're the owner, where do you start?
I think it's a great question, Dom. First of all, I think you've got to clean house. You've got to get rid of everything that ties you to previous organizations. Get rid of Nathaniel Hackett. What is he still doing there, man? Get in a Joe Brady. Get in a young OC that reflects the youth of this team, really. And also get rid of Aaron Rodgers. Like I said, the youth of this team is the best part about the Jets. And having a 40-year-old helmsman, who you're right, can still play, but not to the level he could, I think is dragging this team back. I think a good young QB that there'll be plenty of them in the draft, maybe Ward, maybe Milroe, could be the thing that the Jets need. But the Jets don't need another rebuild. I've been following the NFL for almost 22 years now. And the Jets...
since I came out the womb.
Since I came out the womb, I was watching Red Zone. But they've never been even competitive. So I know for Jets fans saying, oh no, all you need to do is try again. It's hard to hear, but they really need a hard reset.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be really interesting to see what the Jets will do in the draft, especially considering that it's not a particularly strong quarterback draft class. And I'm assuming that despite how they're currently doing, I'm sure they might find some form. Now, I don't think that they're going to take the league by storm and make a surge, because they have no room for error now, the Jets. Their season's done. If they lose another game, I think they're like mathematically completely out. I think there's still, technically speaking, a chance. The AFC East is kind of open. Obviously, the Bills will win it, but there's definitely when the Dolphins are looking pretty weak at the moment, and the Patriots are, well, should have been a walkover for 2 wins, but they haven't been for the Jets. That there's still potential, but I think you're right, Nu, that the Jets are definitely a team which haven't lived up to their hype, their expectation, and it's hard for them to know what to do going forward because, well, what's really the problem? Where's it going wrong? There's nowhere that the stats point to. There's nowhere that really, like, looking at Jets games, it's kind of all going wrong. Greg Zuerlein, I think, has definitely some place in the Jets' errors. He's almost been directly responsible for like 2 or 3 of these losses. Now, the wider problem is that if you are a kick away, or a missed kick away rather, from losing a game, then that's a problem. Right? Like, it's not as simple as, well, Greg Zuerlein should make that kick, then they win. They shouldn't be playing teams like the Patriots that closely. That's not what this team has been built for. So I think the Jets definitely deserve a place on this list, and it'll be really interesting to see what they do in the draft, because since it is a quarterback lighter draft, there might be one later in the board, so they might not have to trade up for it or trade up the farm. But we'll talk about what the Jets will do, I'm sure, closer to the draft. But that then, Nu, will take me to my third ranked team, and I'm pretty certain they'll be on your list. They might be too. Is the Carolina Panthers.
Yep, Dom, they were exactly at my number 2.
So I'll start with the Panthers, and you can continue from where I leave off, basically.
Of course.
So the Panthers are the worst team in the NFL by record at the moment. They're the only 1-win team, and to be clear, they have comfortably been the worst on-field performers over 8 weeks. Bryce Young was playing so badly he had to be benched to prevent a locker room rebellion. Dalton was then the starter. He beat the Raiders with a great performance and even played the Bengals pretty closely as well with a good performance. But since then, the Bears have gone 38-10 versus the Bears, 38-20 versus the Falcons, 47 against the Commanders, and this weekend they were 28-14 to the Bills. They lost all of those to the Broncos. Lost all of those games. So they lost the Broncos game 28-14. They made Bo Nix, the Panthers made Bo Nix look like Patrick Mahomes. He had the game of his life so far. And they're all over the place, the Panthers. They are 33.9 points per game allowed. They've allowed 33.9 points per game. That's last in the NFL. They allow 156 rush yards per game. That is last in the NFL. They allow 232 passing yards per game. That's 25th in the NFL. And I think that's only because teams don't need to pass the ball on them because they are so high up with the score, they're just running down the clock. They score 15.5 points per game, which is 29th. 177 passing yards per game. That's 30th. This team, every side of the ball, offense, defense, and I'm sure special teams as well, is a disaster.
Yeah, Dom, you're completely right. And as you mentioned with the Jets, they're a kick away from winning. They're a kick away from losing. Look at the Giants, who also have 2 wins. They're a kick away from winning against the Cowboys, against the Commanders. The Panthers are getting blown out in every single game they play effectively. They are not competitive. And to be not competitive in the NFL is actually harder than you think it is. Most teams who are bad, even though they're bad teams, are normally at least competitive for maybe a half. From the first snap, the Panthers are the worst team in the league, and they look it. They've got a bit of youth, which is why they're not at number 1 for me. I do like Leggett. I think there's something there. Unfortunately, I think as much with Bryce Young. JC Horn's not a bad player. Derek Brown's not a bad player. They do have some talent, some hope. But the issue is they're kind of regressing. They're not getting better, which I think is the biggest issue with the Panthers.
Yeah, I've come from the same angle, I think, that you have, Nu. I think the Panthers are the worst on-field team in the NFL, as I said at the beginning. But why they're not my number 1, why they're only my 3rd ranked team is I think it's really low-hanging fruit, to be honest with you. Like, this team is just so bad. Like, they lost Derek Brown for an injury. He's their best defensive player. The defense is obviously terrible. They traded away Brian Burns. This is a badly run franchise with their owner, David Tepper. He's meddled in the draft. They flipped from CJ Stroud to Bryce Young, etc. And we know they're going to be bad. We knew it in the preseason. Well, I say we. I did kind of hope that Bryce Young would definitely be better.
Playoff push.
Yeah, just throwing that one back. I knew from day one. But I think we knew, even me included here, from that first game that this team was going to be terrible. And we didn't have the expectations, even though I thought that the Panthers were going to be better. I think the realistic expectations of this team was not that high anyway. So whilst they are in a really tricky spot, they obviously have to have a massive decision about what they do with Bryce Young, what they do with their quarterback position going forward. He is seemingly at the moment okay with being the backup. I don't think he played particularly well against the Broncos. And I don't know what they'll do with Dalton coming back, if Bryce Young will continue to be the starter. I think they're kind of at the point, really, where they might as well just keep starting Bryce Young. He might at least play his way to kind of increase his trade value because he's worth nothing at the moment. It can't really get worse. He's not going to make his trade value any less. Obviously, he might get injured, but I think the risk to reward is there of playing Bryce Young, seeing what you've got. Hell, if he plays if he plays particularly well, he might even stay on the team, depending on how they like this quarterback class. But I think for the time being, the Panthers have a very tricky situation to get out of, and they have lacked the draft capital to be able to do that in recent years. At least they now have that draft capital back. They're not missing their first round pick, which was obviously a massive, massive killer this year when they couldn't really add any high-end talent. I like Leggett, like you said, but he's definitely not quite been the explosive rookie along the lines of like a Lad McConkey has. And really Deontay Johnson, I think they should probably get rid of him anyway. Like, if he's worth anything in a trade, like, I think it was good they brought him in for Bryce Young. He didn't exactly help him. So if you can get something for Deontay Johnson, I would do that. You can get an extra draft pick, get younger, get cheaper, kind of just rebuild, really, then I would do that.
Yeah, Dom, at least the Panthers also, the O-line's not terrible. You know, they brought in Robert Hunt, brought in loads of free agents. the things that they need to improve, obviously it's a lot, but at least it's slightly flashier if you're a Panthers fan. There's nothing worse than drafting 2 tackles, then a D tackle, then a linebacker. As much as we're football guys, as a fan, it's always pretty tough. I remember, Dom, you used to follow the Panthers a little bit, and when they drafted those 9 defensive players that one draft, it's pretty
it was
tough
the
as a
Derek
fan.
Brown, yeah. It was the Derek Brown. And to be fair, I've been proven
Chris
wrong. Derek
Matos.
Brown is a baller.
Yeah,
Derek Brown is a baller. But I was fuming. I was fuming about that. Yeah, I was fuming. I remember it very vividly. But yeah, I just think with the Panthers, it's they are, like you say, with the offensive line, they can put a quarterback in there. I think what really they should do is they should draft a quarterback this year. Bryce Young, they should trade him away for whatever they can kind of get for him. I think, a team potentially like the 49ers or the Eagles, I don't know, a team that has, or maybe the Cowboys, who knows? I mean, they've already got Trey Lance, but essentially a team that does not need Bryce Young to start this year, next year, or even after that. But someone that has like an older veteran, Bryce Young could come in, maybe like learn some of the offense. He could develop into something, who knows? Just having a potential high-level backup is always quite useful in the NFL. But I think then they should also look to draft a quarterback, maybe a Jalen Milroe, maybe a Cam Ward, maybe a Shedeur Sanders. Again, we'll kind of talk about what teams will look to with an eye to the draft pretty soon, because as we can tell with these teams that we're already talking about now, the draft is already very much on their horizon.
Yeah, their season's basically done. If you're a fan of those teams, any of these teams we're going to talk about, the draft is your next main event.
Yeah, it is. It is. And honestly, I can't wait. I'm really excited to do some draft stuff. I'm actually even started looking at some tapes so that we can start doing some mock drafts. But that's neither here nor there. We'll talk about that in another episode. But
so Dom,
you've done your third ranked team and you've done your second ranked team now.
Yeah. So do you want me to do my number 1, or should I think you do your number 2 first? Dom?
I'll do my number 2. Because I think this is when we'll start to differ a bit, which will be interesting. So at number 2, I have the Tennessee Titans.
That's my number 1. That's my number 1.
I've got a number 1 as well. So the Tennessee Titans are a team that the Tennessee Titans are a team which has simply given up. A 52-14 thrashing at the hands of the Detroit Lions. They've traded away DeAndre Hopkins before this. They've waved the white flag. They are a team, talking about the Panthers and why they're not number 1, they are a team which has underachieved relative to the talent they have on their roster and the expectations we had of them in the offseason, in the preseason. They have Calvin Ridley, L'Jarius Sneed, Tyler Boyd, Peter Skoronski, Jeffrey Simmons, the 7th overall pick, J.C. Latham from this year. They have decent talent. They should not be as bad as they are, that's for certain. They have Bill Callahan, the legendary offensive line coach, the father of the current head coach Brian Callahan. He's got Peter Skoronski and J.C. Latham as his left tackle and left guard, I believe. But the Titans have still allowed the fourth most pressures in the league at 97. Why is Skoronski not playing tackle when Nicholas Petit-Frere is allowing the 3rd most pressures in the league at 23? They do not seem like a team which really has an idea of what the hell they're doing.
Yeah, completely, Dom. And I think you're right to point to the Lions game, because that is one of the most embarrassing performances I've seen as a fan. Losing 52-14 when the opposition QB has 89 pass yards. I've never seen a stat line like that. I think a hallmark of any bad team is complete and utter incompetence. And you can see that in special teams. They didn't even know how to kick return. That's the first thing you do as a team. You learn how to stay in your lane, how to tackle, punt, kick, return. Khalif Raymond was, I believe, only 20 yards off the all-time record in kick return yardage in a game. It's so embarrassing. And you're right, Dom. They have this talent again. But first of all, I think it's incompetent ownership. Mike Vrabel was a very, very good head coach. Brought a below-average team to multiple AFC Championship games, was highly competitive, Super Bowl favourites with Ryan Tannehill at some points. They got rid of him. They got rid of their defensive coach, who's now the Giants' defensive coordinator, who's flourishing over in New York. I think it must just be incompetent ownership that is just absolutely killing their franchise. And I saw a funny tweet, which was, you can take the Will Levis out of the team, but you can't take the team out of Will Levis. Is it the other way around? I've done it again. I think I messed up one of the idioms. But oh my God, it's just a circus of embarrassment. It's an absolute carnival out there.
The Will Levis point is a really good one, because it's clear that the problem isn't Will Levis. The offensive woes obviously run much deeper than that. Mason Rudolph is not the second coming of Tom Brady, obviously, and he's not someone that can come in and fix your offense. But both of those guys struggling shows that something is wrong at the core of this team. And really, what concerns me the most about the Titans is that Levis regressed massively this year. He looks like a different quarterback. He started this year looking like he forgot to play the position, how to play the position, and that's a really scary indictment of a team, I think, of a new regime, that a quarterback who's very physically talented and who was drafted only with a second-round pick, but the team decided to stick with him because they wanted to see what he's got. The fact that he looks worse this year and with a new regime and with better weapons is really worrying to me, I think. I'd be really concerned. I thought, wrongly, that Brian Callahan, the head coach, was a defensive-minded head coach. He's not. He was the Bengals offensive coordinator. So something's clearly going wrong somewhere with this organization because they're not making the right decisions from the top down. And as a result, they're making their on-field product unwatchable. The downgrades they've made this offseason, I said it on my TikTok at Dom Corsko, follow me, by the way. And also, if you're listening and you've not subscribed, do that right now because we're trying to get to 100 subscribers. Almost there, and who's getting topless very soon. I said this offseason that I thought the Titans downgraded despite adding more talent. So I didn't love their draft pick. I didn't love JC Latham at 7. I said it was a reach, and I think that's kind of proven to be the case. Obviously, he might develop into a great pick. I'm not saying that he's not going to be good, but I still think that was a reach nevertheless. I didn't love their free agent addition of Tyler Boyd. I think he's meh at best. He's kind of mid. And L'Jarius Sneed is not playing anywhere near the level that he was playing in Kansas City. And that's the problem with the cornerback position, is that it massively fluctuates year on year. We've seen it with AJ Terrell at the Falcons. We've seen it this year with Sauce Gardner. It's a really hard position to consistently be good at. And when your hallmark signing is a cornerback who's come off his best year, it's very, very unlikely that he's going to immediately be able to replicate that in a new scheme and on a new team. Derrick Henry, go on, you go.
So Dom, just sorry to interrupt you for Derrick Henry, but I think it's a really important point because when you look at the players who have left the Titans, they have flourished in these new places. Derrick Henry, Malik Willis, they've gotten better for leaving the Titans. And these players who are playing at such high level have got worse going to the Titans. It's like a factory of just making people worse. I think that's... I'm sorry for cutting you off there, Dom, but that's what I'm saying is... They have talent, but they're not utilizing it. They're not developing it. And that's why even though they're young and have talent in positions, well, they're not even that young, but they have a lot of talent in positions, they are my number one worst team. It's because they make people worse. There's no flourishes anywhere. They're embarrassing on coaching, embarrassing special teams, offense, defense. I don't want to watch the Titans. Nobody does. And that's why they're my worst team.
I couldn't agree with you more, Nu. I was in Tennessee literally a few days ago, and we asked the Uber drivers, are you a fan of the Titans? And literally everyone's like, no. They came here in 1996. A few of the younger people are, but they've not got that grassroots kind of feel there yet. And they go mad for the Predators, who are the NHL team. I didn't even know they had a stadium there, but they do. It's literally everywhere. It's Go Preds. I saw nothing about the Titans. I don't know if it's because they're terrible or if I was just not in the right spaces. I'm sure, obviously, there are fans that are local. I'm not denying that. But I thought it was really interesting seeing that the stadium's in downtown. It's right there in the heart of the city. It's not like MetLife Stadium where you've got to schlep out to the sticks. It's right there. You can literally see it when you're walking down the streets. So for there to not be that kind of fan feel, that center in the town, in a place where the stadium is literally right there, I thought was really kind of telling of the state of the team at the moment. But what I was saying is they've lost Derrick Henry. That's a mistake. They lost Ryan Tannehill. That's clearly a mistake. Again, he wasn't going to fix the team, I'm sure, but that was not the right move if you're putting in Mason Rudolph because Will Levis has to be benched. And they fired Mike Vrabel. That's a massive mistake. I think Vrabel, by the end of his head coachship, it was clear that it was flawed, right? He didn't have the relationship that he needed to with the ownership. They kind of reached the end of their tether with him. But you said it yourself, Nu. He consistently had this Vikings team playing above its means. It was greater than the sum of its parts when Mike Vrabel was the coach. It is no longer that. In fact, it's worse than the sum of its parts. They're literally playing down to a level that they shouldn't be playing down to. And that's why they're my second. They're my lowest team, Nu, for the exact reason why they are first. Because they make players worse, and the players that leave get better. And that is, I think it was a really good point of yours, New, a real damning indictment of the state of this team. But then I've got my first ranked team, New.
Or who is it? Who is it? Oh, can I have a guess?
Have a guess.
I'm trying to think because you'll have a hot take. Maybe the Dolphins? Or is that a bit too outrageous? I don't think they're the worst team.
To be fair, I actually when I was doing this, I had to kind of brutally cut quite a few. I wanted to have like 5 honorable mentions, but the one that definitely should have made this list or is right on the cusp is the Jags, because the Jags always manage to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. But my number one ranked team, New. So my worst, the team that I think is the worst in the NFL at the moment is the New York Jets.
Wow.
Relative to expectation, they are comfortably the worst team in the league. They just lost to the 1-win Patriots, who people previously said were the worst team in the league, led by their backup quarterback. Not even Drake May. Jacoby Brissett was the one that ultimately won the Patriots this game. This was meant to be the best Jets team ever assembled. Hall of Fame quarterback Aaron Rodgers, Zach Wilson's gone, they've improved the offensive line, they've got the best defense in the league, and they've done absolutely nothing. The Jets are a badly run organization. They sacked their head coach when he was clearly not the problem. And we already discussed this on this podcast, New, that everyone from all around, right, from people like you and me to people like properly on TV people like Emmanuel Acho and Dan Orlovsky, etc., all the big talking heads, right?
The amazing analysts that they are.
The amazing analysts like Emmanuel Acho, who I really have a personal vendetta against. So that's why he came into my head. He's not someone that we want to emulate on this show.
Ryan Balder.
Brian with his finger just pointing the other way. We have all said that was a bad move to make, that it wasn't the right move. They are 0-3 since firing him. And in 2 of those games, New, they were favourites in. They gave all of their power to an old quarterback past his prime, coming off a serious injury. They're a team who went all in for a worse record than they had with Zach Wilson this time last year. They were 4-4 at this time in the season last year. I wouldn't even call them a team. I would call them a gathering of misfit players, because they don't resemble a team on the field. They're just guys, as I said, literally in the last episode we recorded, the one from week 6. They've rung up some blokes, gone, hey, do you want to play for us? And they've strapped up their boots, put on their pads, and they just walked out on the field. No practice time, no cohesiveness, no chemistry. They're just a team of mercenaries, it feels like. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no... What are the New York Jets? Because there's no feel, there's no X factor, there's no explosiveness or dynamism. It's just they're an empty team. They're an empty team. And they'll fire Salah, but they will stick by their kicker, who essentially cost them 3 wins, and you can find for 10 a penny on the street. You can literally find a new one sitting on his couch right now. And what's the ironic thing is, New, is that the defense is now underperforming because they got rid of their defensive-minded head coach, and their defensive coordinator is currently the interim head coach, and he's spread too thin. And now Sauce Gardner not playing well. The defense as a whole not really living up to the name it's got on there, or the hype coming into it. They're really missing one of their defensive linemen whose name now escapes me, the one that got injured. Do you want to help me out?
Mosley? No.
Not Mosley.
Williams.
Not McDonald. Jermaine Johnson.
They're
really missing Jermaine Johnson, because he was a really good run defender off the edge as well as a pass rusher. And really, the bottom line here for me, New, with the Jets, is that they seem to be a childhood fairy story. They seem to be like a childhood fairy tale, like a story about greed. Like a cautionary tale you read to a child before they go to bed. Like they added Rodgers, gave them the keys to the city, fired their loyal head coach. They brought in all the offensive weapons they could possibly get their hands on, and they still lose. Rodgers might come back next year, but why would they want him to?
Yeah, Dom, I completely agree with you. Like I said earlier, there's so many problems. If you want to draw a person in comparison, you can maybe compare them to Man U, who just sacked Ten Hag. A lot of money thrown at people who don't really want to be there. I think there's something to be said there. But Dom, I'm going to pose the same question that you proposed to me: is what is the problem with the New York Jets, and how do you fix it?
The problem with the New York Jets, I think, is bad ownership. And I think it's bad team building. I think the real issue with the Jets, obviously, as I said at the beginning, I didn't want to give it away because I knew they were going to be our number one team. But Aaron Rodgers isn't playing badly. Like last game, he really, it's not that he's coughing up balls to the defense and can't escape the pass rush or his arm is shot. Like, he's generally playing all right football. The issue, I think, though, is still Aaron Rodgers, but for the reasons off the field. I think it's a really dangerous precedent to set that a team will essentially give their quarterback, who already is a very powerful player in the locker room, the ability to be the most powerful player for the whole organization. Like, they let him bring all of his mates from Green Bay, and none of them have played very well. Why is Alan Lazard on this team? Why is he on this team? Sorry,
isn't Randall Cobb on the Jets? Or it's one of those.
There was an offensive lineman. Yeah, there was an offensive lineman who they brought in as well, who played absolutely terribly last year. I don't know. Like, it's just, he turned this team into like Aaron Rodgers FC, and that's not how teams are built. It's not that you just get to bring in your mates. Like, yeah, of course, he's got chemistry with Davante Adams. Okay, great, big whoop. The real focus should be on him building chemistry with not with Zach Wilson, with Garrett Wilson, with, hell, Mike Evans, who is now on the trading block because Aaron Rodgers decided he just didn't want to throw to him, and now when he does throw to him, he's not very good and isn't in the right place up the seam, and he literally publicly outs him on a post-game presser. Like, Aaron Rodgers off the field is the problem with the Jets, and that's why I said he might want to come back next year, but why would you let him? Like, he's not done what you needed him to do in terms of leading a team. He's made our team actively worse in terms of the players that he's brought in, has taken over the organization in terms of the decision making. And you're shocked that the player who is not meant to be a general manager has made your team worse. I just think it was a really bad move from the ownership to allow him to be in this position. Yeah, you wanted Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, you wanted to win a Super Bowl. Okay, great. Every team does. But you've not done that. You've actually made your team worse. And what scares me the most about the Jets with regards to kind of bring it back around to the beginning now, Nu, is that we're talking about teams here that have no hope. And it's not that the Jets have no hope in winning games. They do. They won't be a bottom 3, bottom 5, I'm sure, I hope, team in terms of record. But it is literally going to take them years to recover from this in terms of team building, with all the resources they've thrown at older players, Alan Lazard, Davante Adams, Tyron Smith, for example, who looks like a shell of himself. God. Like, they've spent a lot of money on really old players, and they're not going to be easy to get rid of. And as a result, it's going to take quite a while for this Jets team to resemble a functioning, young, exciting team, because all of those adjectives are not how I describe the Jets right now.
Yeah, Dom, I think you make a great point. And I saw a player poll recently. I'm not sure how much weight I would give to this, but the 3 most hated players in the NFL are apparently Odell Beckham Jr., Travis Kelce, and then Aaron Rodgers, as voted as by players. Again, not too sure how much currency I put into that, but I think it does show everyone just hates him. They don't like playing with him. Even in Green Bay, all he would do is constantly fight with ownership because they didn't draft good enough receivers. Well, how are the Green Bay receivers doing now compared to your mates, Aaron? Like, it shows that this whole time, all he does is whine and complain and do ayahuasca and refuse to get vaccinated. And just, he's like obviously he's 40, but in the context of the NFL, he's basically an old man. He's like talking to your like crazy grandfather. It's like he's started to lose it up here. He doesn't know what's going on. He probably still thinks Brett Favre is starting above him. Like, he's done, man. And that's what I think. His talent is not the issue. I think that's a really good point, Dom, that I didn't think about. It's him. It's his character. Yeah. It's his personality that is really sinking this team. For the best quarterback of all time to have that much talent and only win 1 Super Bowl. I'm not going to say anything further. Not going to be too controversial. But I completely agree, Dom. Aaron Rodgers needs to go.
Yeah. And have you seen that meme, Nu? We'll finish on this. Have you seen that meme where it's the office handshaking one? And it's like the Jets, highest expectations in 25 years. The Patriots, lowest expectations in 25 years. And them shaking hands, and it's got like 2-6 record. Like, the fact that those two teams, I think, is the ultimate death knell. The fact that the Patriots, who, as we mentioned, like, yeah, they're terrible, but at least they've got hope. They're almost the antithesis of each other. They've got the same record, but they're two sides of the same coin. Patriots, up and coming, exciting, young quarterback. Like, yeah, they're not a good team on paper, but give it a few years, give it a bit of time, and they could become one. The Jets are like the end of their lifespan. They have put everything into it, and they're still terrible. They're not going to win anything like the Patriots won't win anything. And to compare, if you said to me that those two teams were going to have the same record at week 8 and the Patriots were going to beat the Jets, I wouldn't have believed you. But no, that's the NFL. Any given Sunday, am I right?
Very true, very true.
Any given Sunday. So that wraps up our no hope special is what I'm going to call it on YouTube. So if you do go and listen to this on YouTube, if you are listening to this on YouTube, then do subscribe. I want to see 100. I'm going to be refreshing it. 100 subscribers. That's been my goal now for quite some time. So I'll be really excited to reach it. And as I said, Nu will do the pod topless at 100 subscribers. I'll do it topless at 1,000. So there's your motivation. Watch us now.
I don't want to reach 1 million. I don't know where that's going to go from there.
The follow count is going to slowly tick down. But if you have enjoyed this episode, then please do give it a like, give it a comment. If you're listening on Spotify, then follow us there as well. Give us a comment on Spotify as well. We have only a few weeks left now of the regular season, which is both a bit disappointing, a bit upsetting, but also very exciting because our draft content will be marching ever closely forward. We'll be starting to bring you that, I think, in maybe 3 or 4 weeks. But until that point, Nu, I've been your host, Dom Corbs. That's been my co-host, Nick Corbs. Thank you for listening. We've been on Unsportsmanlike Conduct.
See ya.